Alrighty, everyone, let us get started. Thank you all very much for joining. We are super excited to have everyone in the room and our speaker, Diego. I'll start with telling everyone that we're recording this meeting, so please be mindful. We will be sharing out the recording to people that cannot join. We are hosting this as a part of the Co.Lab program. Co.Lab is a company that hosts training programs to help people break into tech, especially people from non-traditional backgrounds. We do it through a couple of different ways, one of which is our program that helps you helps you equip with real life experience to succeed in the tech industry. It's not just about landing a job. It is important to land the job, but we also want you to be able to do a great job once you're at your company and working as a product manager. We do this by setting up teams of product managers, designers, and engineers who work together in a team setting to simulate a real life work environment where you engage in sprint planning, and go through the entire product's lifecycle from brainstorming to having a product and having users use it and give you feedback and iterating on it. This not only helps you understand what product managers do, but also build a portfolio of a real product that is tangible and that you can show to hiring managers, recruiters, and everyone that you meet along the way, including your friends. To date, we've had 400 students participate in our program, with alumni working at various startups, as well as big tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. At Co.Lab, we believe that everyone belongs in tech, and we also try to have free resources to support our initiative by building a community through Discord and sharing resources that are available. There are free booklets, books that we will share links for, and are also available on the Co.Lab website. Additionally, we also host events like these with amazing speakers like Diego, who have different perspectives, different journeys that they want to share with you, so that you can understand that there truly are no limits to what you can do, and your background doesn't necessarily need to hold you back. So with that, I will jump into an overview of the event and then hand over the mic to Diego. We will start with a session where Diego talks about how to break into product management from a non-traditional, non-computer science background, and then do a fireside chat. I will start with a few pre-submitted questions, following which we can have questions from the audience. Please feel free to raise your hands when the time comes. We'd love for you to be engaging with the chat. If you aren't comfortable, you can always feel free to DM me or share questions on the chat as well. With that, I'll hand it over to Diego, who is on LinkedIn at Diego Granados and also on Twitter at PM Diego Granados. We're super excited to have him. He is a senior product manager at LinkedIn and has previous experiences working on products at Microsoft as well as Cisco. Thanks for being here, Diego, and over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. Hey, everyone. It's so great to see all of you guys. And yeah, no, I'm super excited to talk about product management, how to break into, especially without the traditional background. So yeah, Josh, we can start with that. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. We can do more questions later, but you let me know. You want to start with that?
Yes, that sounds great. Let's hear about what you think are a couple important points to keep in mind and how you would look at breaking into product management from a non-traditional background.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 10 years ago, we always had this idea that, to be a product manager, you had to have the computer science background. You needed to, or have a, startup founder type of experience to go into product management. And maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was very true. And it was harder for other folks like myself and many of you that probably don't have that computer science background. And I like that the things have changed, and I'm trying to get rid of the calling it the traditional path, right? Because I don't think it's traditional anymore. To give you some data points, I have now at LinkedIn, but I met this person maybe a year ago. She was a professional basketball player for about 10 years, and then she became a product manager. And then I also know an opera singer who sang for 40 years until he became a product manager. So if that's not proof enough that you can be a product manager without having the technical background or any, traditional background, I don't know what else to tell you. But let's talk about what are the things that you can do. What matters most, especially when you're trying to get into tech, into product management, and you don't have that CS background experience or experience as a software engineer, what matters the most is your story. The reason why people are able to break into product management without having that CS background or without being, coming from an MBA, and we can talk about MBAs and all that stuff as well, is because they were able to make sure that their story makes sense. What that means is that they did some things in the past and they talked about the transferable skills. I'll use myself as an example. A few years ago, I was a consultant. I was in business intelligence. I was working with customers. I was working with a group of engineers, but I was not the engineer on my team. I worked with a designer who would help us, and we would build these scorecards, dashboards, stuff like that. When I went into product management, I always had thoughts of, well, how am I going to convince people that I can be a product manager if I've never launched a product, if I have never worked on a roadmap, if I have never interviewed users to get feedback or validation or do A/B testing or any of these things. But the more I learned about product management, the more it started resonating with me that the things that I've done in the past actually made a lot of sense to product management. For example, tell me if this sounds like product management to you guys. I work with customers to understand their problems. I brought those problems back to my team. And as a team together, engineers, designers, and myself as a consultant, we would work on a plan, 3-6 months plan on how we would tackle that problem to solve our customer pain point. We would do iterations where we would show every week or every 2 weeks our advances in the product or the project to our customer. We would get feedback, we would change, iterate, adjust the course until we finally launch the product and then move on to another customer. After that, we would send a survey and we would collect the data and see how we can improve better our services and essentially our work. Doesn't that sound a little bit like product management to you? Hopefully, I see some nods in the windows, and that's what this is about. You don't have to be a consultant, by the way. You don't have to be a project manager. You don't have to be a product owner. It's about how you tell that story, and I'm focusing a lot on that because I see a lot of people that have the right background, meaning you've done things in the past and you don't translate that in your stories. Your stories are, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to be a product manager? Why do you want to work here? Or even behavioral questions in an interview, like tell me about a time where you had to deal with the difficult customers, right? Every time you tell your story, whether it's in an interview or even before that in a coffee chat, all that matters to hiring managers and recruiters are transferable skills. You might have been a bartender. You deal with customers, you get feedback, you see what the problems are, you solve them, right? They have a problem for a specific beverage, and you see how you can improve the business based on those things. So it really doesn't matter where you work or what you're doing or what you were doing a few years ago. What matters is how you translate that story. But let me go to the other point, which is I'm assuming that you have the skills, but what if you don't? What if you, as I'm telling this story, you think about, well, I haven't done any of those things really, or I'm a student, or I've been in this industry for 10 years. There are a few options. The number one thing to do is reflect on what some of these keywords in product management mean to you. For example, a customer doesn't always have to be the person who's buying from you. A customer can be an internal team that you're servicing, that you're helping, can be another team within your organization. That's a customer. Maybe you think that you have not planned a roadmap. If you've made a plan for the next 3, 6, 9 months, 1 year, that's a roadmap. Roadmap is a fancy word. And yes, I am abstracting the term roadmap into a very simplistic way to put it, but it's all about your understanding of the fundamentals. But what if after all of that, you still say, Diego, listen, this is great, but I still do not have the experience. I don't have the stories. I don't have the skills. Most people fail in knowing what to do next when you actually don't have the required skills or the transferable skills. What most people do is they spend countless hours on the resume. They iterate and iterate and iterate, and they apply and they apply, and it's rejection after rejection after rejection, or simply no calls. And then they go and search for a resume writer, and then they go online and search for something else, and it gets frustrating. If you've been in this position, I get it. It's overwhelming. But why is it wrong? Well, it's wrong because most of the time when we prepare our story in our resume, in our LinkedIn profile, most of the time we're preparing the story for ourselves. If you look at your resume and it doesn't scream product management, transferable skills, your resume is not for a hiring manager. You have to make it easy for them to say, Josh, I see your resume. You're not a PM. Let's assume you're not a PM for a moment. You're not a PM, but I see that you have a lot of transferable skills. Yep, I trust that you're going to do a good job as a PM. But if Josh would have told me, you know what, I made this deal happen for X billions of dollars, and I did this financial analysis for this market, and I raised this campaign for a 1 million budget in marketing, blah blah blah, whatever, I'm going to be like, that's really cool, but that doesn't apply to product management. So when you tell your stories in the way that you prepare them for the hiring manager, for the recruiter, and you tell them, here's all my transferable skills, then at that moment, your story starts to make sense. Don't work on your resume forever. Your resume is just one part. Then after that, you also have to think about, what if I really don't have the skills? What is my plan? Your plan can't be, again, just focusing on your resume. You need a plan. Your plan can be building a side project. Your plan can be volunteering. Your plan can be building your own product. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from building your own thing. Let me tell you a story. When I became a product manager, my first job was at Cisco. And I always thought, how cool would it be to be a product manager in a company like Twitch? I love video games. I love streaming. I wanted to be a product manager on Twitch. And I got the opportunity to chat with a product manager at Twitch. And he asked me a question. And he said, Diego, listen, you've been a couple of years as a PM at Cisco. And that's awesome. I'm sure you can do the job of a PM, but what have you done in the consumer space? And I was like, oh, nothing. Like, I mean, I'm a consumer of streaming. I love video games, but I've never done anything for consumers. And he gave me good advice and said, well, listen, you're good at interviews. You're good at, telling your story and what's not, but we're not sure if you have what it takes to do the job because you've never done the consumer space type of job. Then I went to Microsoft and I became a PM in AI machine learning. And I didn't have that background. So I studied for it and I convinced the hiring manager that I was able to make all my transferable skills and my eagerness to learn, and I got the job. But I always thought, how cool would it be to be a PM for Xbox? I love video games. I want to be a PM for Xbox. And then I started talking with people and I was like, that's really cool. And what is your experience with consumers? And I was like, oh, same story again. I get it. I don't have the experience with consumers. And I just let it go. I said, you know what? All right, that's fine. I'll leave the consumer space to just my hobbies and I'll play video games in my living room and, I'll continue growing as a PM at Microsoft, great company. Let's see what happens in the next few years. Like I'll try it again somehow. Even thinking of moving to companies like Meta or Google or Apple or whatever company you want to choose. My profile was great for the business to business. And I'm telling you all this story because of this reason. In 2020, when I started creating content, I started with things like YouTube. Then I went into LinkedIn. Then that started growing. I tried Instagram and TikTok and I failed miserably. And then I moved on to Twitter and that's kind of going again. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I found something that I'm passionate about. And I believe I'm kind of good at it, at least a little bit, enough to be here in front of you guys teaching you something. So thank you again for inviting me. And then one day, one of my posts caught the attention of a senior director of product at LinkedIn that started with a coffee chat. And in the coffee chat, she asked me, so how do you think we can improve LinkedIn? And at that moment in the coffee chat, I put on my PM hat and said, hey, you know what? Here's the users, the pain points, the problems. Here's what I've seen. And, at the end of the coffee chat, she said, I love this. I need to run, but why don't you come and build this with my team? Many conversations later, that became my interviews and then offer for LinkedIn. But the reason why I'm telling you this story, even though it was already when I broke into PM, because when I talked earlier about products and projects, we always think about, oh God, I need to make a new Uber. I need to compete with Airbnb. I need to create a cool app that people download. And that's not true. Side projects can be as simple as a podcast, as a blog, as a newsletter, as a video log. But then you're going to realize that very quickly, they don't have anything simple. You're going to talk to users, all of you. They're going to give you feedback. Everyone's going to have a different preferences. You need to adjust to the market. Then you're going to iterate. You're going to provide hypotheses. Maybe you hit a wall. You need to change direction. And then you start writing in a different way, in a different form. You're going to get more feedback. Then you're going to need to grow your team. So maybe you hire developers or editors or content writers or whoever's going to help you. Now you need to manage people. Then you're going to keep growing and expanding and doing more things and keep testing and keep iterating. And at the end, you're going to have a ton of stories of how by doing this side project, not only you're going to get experience in an industry, in my case, in the consumer space, but also you're going to get all the transferable skills into product management. It takes time. It takes grit. It takes patience. Everything that you guys have seen, for those who know me, everything that you guys have seen that I've created in the past 2 years has been by myself. No help. There's no company behind me. I learned how to edit from YouTube. And so if somebody in the room tells me, yeah, but you must have all the time in the world, the answer is no. At the time I started, I was working at Microsoft. I was studying a second master's degree, and I have a family. And the reason why I was able to do all those things is I had to change habits. I had to change the way I spend my time. So I watch a few shows, but every time I wanted to go into Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and any of these social media, I'll be like, nope, let me spend that time, those 5-10 minutes, into something about my project, a script for a new YouTube video, a post for tomorrow's LinkedIn content, whatever it is. It's not about having the time in the world. You can tell me all the excuses that you want, and one by one, I can tell you how you're wrong, and it's all about trade-offs. And this conversation sounds like it's starting to go into a different direction than breaking into product management. But the reality is that breaking into product management in this context of without having the right tech background, again, the typical background, is not about your resume. It's not about your LinkedIn profile. That's just how you communicate to the world. But you need to analyze your skills. And listen, it may take you 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or 5 years to get into product management. I didn't become a PM until I had 7 years of experience in another industry, plus an MBA. And you don't need an MBA to break into PM. But that was just my journey. So it's about how you tell your story and how you create your story. And if your story is, again, you need to build those skills, then build those skills. Don't keep refining your resume until you get tired of it and you get frustrated and you throw product management over the window. Let me talk about 2 more things, and then Josh, happy to stop or happy to continue, whatever you prefer. But let me talk about 2 quick things. One is product management is awesome. I love it, but it's just another job. A lot of people want to go into product management because everybody else wants to go into product management. Figure out if product management is for you. And if it is, that's awesome. Welcome. There's a lot of people here in the room who are here to support you. But if it's not, don't feel disappointed. Don't feel that, oh, I didn't get it. And I don't know if I wanted it, but everybody wants it, so I feel like a failure. Part of this journey of going into product management, it's also discovering if it's for you. And if it's not, it's great. And if it is, it's also great. So don't take it as it has to be the ultimate goal. And the second thing that I wanted to share, and then I'll pause it for a moment, is there are other ways in which you can plan your career. We think of product management as 0 to 1. I'm here today. I'm doing whatever it is that you're doing. My next step has to be product management, no matter what. Otherwise, I'm done with it. Screw it. Let's go for something else. What you can do, and again, factor in time, patience, and all of the things that we all have to do. You could say, for example, imagine that your dream company was Google or Apple or Facebook or whatever company you want. And you're doing project management or program management or marketing or finance or whatever it is that you want. You can always go into these companies in a very similar role to what you're doing today, network internally, work internally with teams, and then transfer into product management. And by the way, you can apply the same thing at your company today. You can shadow PMs, you can learn from them, you can prove. For example, I could say, Josh, hey, listen, I know our teams are kind of close. I see you're working on some really cool stuff. Listen, I'm not here to ask you for mentorship, but I was wondering if I could shadow you in a call. If you have a customer call, I would love to take notes for you. I can help you with notes. I can help you do a recap of a meeting. I'm willing to spend time to remove some tasks from you that take a lot of time and do those for you. And when the time I master those things after a few sessions, then I'll say, hey, Josh, listen, I'm going to continue doing this. Is there something else that I could do for you? Maybe you have a document that I can, help proofread. And little by little, I can gain, that confidence from Josh that, yeah, I can do the job because I've been doing it, shadowing him. And sooner rather than later, either his team can offer me a job as a PM, or going back to the beginning of what I was talking about, I would gain the transferable skills that will help me tell my story in a great way to other companies if that's what I want to do and I want to go outside of my company. Let me pause there. Happy to go deeper into any of these topics. Or Josh, you said you had a few questions, and yeah, happy to take it whatever you want.
That was awesome. I love that. Some great advice. I really like your focus on transferable skills, right? Because it's not really, do you know computer science? Can you code? Have you been a product manager before? No, it's about what skills do you have that can help you be a great product manager. Absolutely love that. And I also want to talk about how, if you're from a non-traditional background, again, right, talking about how PM has been in the past, you still have a different perspective. And a lot of people don't value what their background and perspective has to offer to an industry that may not necessarily have a lot of opera singers, basketballers, and people who act within our daily lives, but are still our customers. And a very simple example is one of our Co.Lab students was a dentist, and after going through the Co.Lab program, is going to work at a software company that makes software for the dental industry. That person didn't have traditional computer science or PM background, but they had this perspective where they knew something about a topic and were experts and could leverage that to become a product manager. So there's multiple different ways to think about transferable skills and perspectives that you can provide. And I would encourage everyone to think about what can you provide to the company, the product, the team that you want to join as a product manager. That's absolutely great. And that's what we focus on Co.Lab. For the experience, we want people to pick up transferable skills and learn how to work with teammates, because as a product manager, you cannot move mountains by yourself. You need everyone's buy-in. And I think with that, I would like to jump into one of the very commonly asked questions. And I think, Diego, you posted about this recently, which is a product manager has to do a lot, work with a bunch of different stakeholders, and is ultimately accountable for the product success. If the product is doing great, they'll get a pat on their back. But if it's not doing great, they're the first person who leadership is going to go to and ask, hey, what's happened, right? So how can product managers who need to work with all these different teams, designers, engineers, marketing, finance, and the list goes on, how do they influence them and get their buy-in without having authority over them? What is your take on that?
It's such a great topic, because going back to the transferable skills, right? We always talk about, oh, well, but you need, dealing with ambiguity and being data driven, and I don't know what else, but it's all about, those kind of things, right? But the reality is that if you ask me, what is the number one thing that you have to do as a product manager, is build relationships. Building relationships, it's one of the most important things, in my opinion, that a PM should do. Because in the end, like you said, Josh, you can't really build a product by yourself. You are there to support the team. And so very recently, I posted a video about this, but I saw there's this fantastic TED talk by a guy named Ron Carucci. He's a consultant and speaker, and he's done a study of analyzing more than 2,500 CEOs in the world to see what makes them effective in their leadership, in influencing others. And the best thing, what I like the most about this TED Talk is that he breaks it down into, there are 4 big traits that every leader should have if they want to be great influencers. And no leader was born with these ones, and instead they actually worked on them. The first one of these traits is context. As a leader, you need to learn about the world around you. As a PM, you need to learn about your team. You need to learn about who is, in power, who makes decisions, and what customers are saying or the partners are saying. You need to understand the context. And the worst PMs, they actually come into the room assuming they know absolutely everything. Where you have to always be a sponge. You have to always learn. The second trait is seeing the bigger picture. And this is understanding that your project, your product, if we talk about big companies, or even startups that have multiple products, your product is not just a product standalone. Your product plays with the rest of the ecosystem. And so this is about understanding that each piece needs its own attention, and that each piece fits together nicely, versus ignoring everything and favoring your product only, or another product or certain features, and ignoring the rest. This is going to cause some imbalance in the team. They're not going to be happy. So seeing the bigger picture is definitely important. The third one is choice. As a PM, you have to put your foot down and say no, or say yes and explaining why you're not going to build something. But you have to make a lot of decisions and a lot of trade-offs, and be very conscious and efficient about them, so that for every no you say, your yes are very impactful and meaningful. The worst PMs that I've seen, and don't get me wrong, a bunch of us, when we start, we fall into this trap. We say yes to everything, and that's just chaos. So you have to be careful and learn how to say no. And then the fourth one is connections. And connections is really interesting, because the way that they put it here is, you have to make connections that matter. If I know that I want something from Josh because he's in a position power, that's not going to turn out really well in the future. But if we make a connection, if we made some sort of, not even friendship if you don't want to, but at least a good working relationship in the future, that's going to pay dividends. So those are the 4 traits, and I believe they apply to product management as well.
I really like that. I like thinking about it in terms of leadership, because that's what a lot of leaders also have to do. Because yes, some CEOs, we think that they have authority over their entire organization, but really they only have authority over the people that are directly reporting to them, and everyone else they need to influence indirectly without authority. So that's awesome. With that, I want to dive a little deeper into transferable skills. We talked a bunch about it, but I want to expand on what these skills are, and then break them down into a couple of different buckets. Hard skills, soft skills, and also answer the question that Kieran asked, which is, do we need to know coding to get into product management, or even progress along the path of product managers, right?
Yeah.
So I would like your opinion, Diego, on what you think are the most important transferable skills for PMs, and how people can think about them in different categories.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with defining what kind of role do you want to get into. And Kieran, let me know if this answers your question. If you're interested, whoever in the room is interested in something like a technical product manager role, because you like cloud, you like backend stuff, you like scaling system, that's your thing, then it's very likely that you do need to know how to code, because you're going to be working with backend systems. You're going to be working with cloud. You need to know how cloud works. And while you won't be coding, you're going to have a lot of technical discussions with engineers and a lot of trade-offs decisions to make. And so while it's still not necessary, it's definitely much better to have that experience. In fact, for many technical product manager roles, you're going to see that they either required or the preferred qualifications, you're going to see they ask for computer science background or software engineering experience. That being said, not every company has a technical PM classification. Some just classify in PM. So yeah, it's a little bit of a mess with the title, but for simplicity of this conversation, let's just break it into 2: technical PM and then PM. If you go for a PM role, which is a little bit more, let's say, front-end user-facing type of product. So if we think of, for example, Google will have technical product managers working on Google Maps on the back end, trying to scale, right, the whole system for images, for navigation, for GPS calculations, blah, blah, so on and so forth. And then you'll have the PMs on the front end working more on what you see on your phone when you open Google Maps, right? For the backend stuff, scaling, images, GPS, calculation, all that stuff, yes, I might need to know how to code, or at least the computer science or software engineering background. But on the other side, for the user interface, not always. It's not necessary. It's not mandatory. You don't even know how to code, which is very different than speaking tech or speaking technology terms, right? You have to understand the difference between databases at a high level. You have to understand how, for example, if you were working on how to log in through Google, you need to understand at a high level how the login experience works. So you don't need to know how to code, you need to know how the tech stacks work. And that can be learned on the job if they give you the opportunity, or before that, just get used to reading tech news and understanding tech terms. Now, that being said, transferable skills. So if we go for the PM, not the technical PM, but the PM one, first of all, hard skills, not really. Everything about Agile, Scrum, CSPO certifications, what else? Computer science and all of those different things, they don't mean a thing to any hiring manager. They don't give you a competitive edge. They don't give you an advantage. Those are nice diplomas to hang on your wall, but they're not going to be the reason why you break into PM. The soft skills, so for example, being data-driven is one of the most important ones, working cross-functionally, ideally working with engineers and designers, but if not, at least showing how you're working cross-functionally has some technical component to it, even if it's not in depth. Then another one is going to be, this is a little bit harder to grasp, but it's dealing with ambiguity. If I ask you, tell me about a time when you had to complete a project without having all the information, think about your own experience and think about how you made a project successful without having all the information and what you did. And so that's a really good transferable skills. Yeah, to not overcomplicate, I would say those are the big ones. I would focus much more on working cross-functionally, being data-driven. And then, of course, for your resume and LinkedIn stuff, like anything about roadmaps, like making plans, anything about vision and strategy. Vision and strategy are also buzzwords, but it's really more about, did you projected a plan? Did you thought of where your project should go next? Did you thought of how you would solve the customer problem? In a abstract, small sense of the word, that's a vision and a strategy. It takes much more than that, but yeah. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. Those are great skills to keep in mind, and I hope the audience is taking notes. We'll obviously share the recording out because yes, those are skills that I've been constantly working on to land my product management role, and also continuously try to improve on to make sure that I'm learning and growing. I definitely think that they help with a lot of, dealing with ambiguity and working with different stakeholders. And like we mentioned previously, I think the best way to learn these skills, right, is to do something hands-on. It's something you can do through working with other students at Co.Lab. It's something you can do by yourself, right? If you have the commitment and the tenacity, sometimes it's difficult, which is why some programs like these help you, because they're structured experiential learning. But you can get together with friends. You can, work on a side project by yourself. It doesn't need to be something that is what other people are doing to land their product management jobs, but it's something that you need to iterate on continuously, because like, Diego mentioned about a couple of his failures, but I'm sure all of us product managers have our failures at work and outside work. But what keeps us going is that we iterate, we learn most from our failures and not from our successes, to keep going through that process of, okay, what do I need to do differently? And sometimes it's about the product, but sometimes it's about yourself and the processes that you're using. How do you change how you're working? How do you change your perspective about what you're thinking about? So I really, really like that. And then I will ask one more question, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A, which is we also talked about understanding what the product management job is, right? If you want to get into it, if you're 100% set, that's awesome. We love it. We're here to support you. But for some people who are still wondering, is product management for me? I know there's a lot of hype around it. Everyone wants to do product management, but is it for me, right? What would you recommend people do to think about it? What is a good way to deeply understand what product managers do? And then I'd also like a quick 30-second take on what parts you enjoy the most about product management, and what are some things that you don't enjoy about product management. Like with any job,
Right.
there are some things that you have to do. So I think that'll be a good overview to have a balanced perspective on what working as a product manager is.
Yeah, absolutely. If I were to stay here and talk about the different types of product managers, the nuances of different companies, the dependencies on the titles, the unknowns of the titles, and everything that I know about product management, it would take me hours, because it's just impossible to define in a short amount of time or in a concise way. Every book you read, every video you watch, including mine, every article, every tweet, every LinkedIn post that talks about what is product management, that's the cookie cutter answer to what is product management. That is not the standard in the industry. You're going to see how most authors, we describe product management as, I hate the word mini CEO because that's not true, but we describe it as the person who's driving absolutely everything around and making the product successful. And we put it in the almost like the captain of the ship. And that's not true for 99% of the people in product management out there, myself included. The best thing you can do to figure out is product management for me is to ask yourself first a few questions. What type of company do I want to join? Do I want to join startups because I like fast-paced environment, a lot of unknowns? Do I like more the big tech corporation that is more established, probably slightly slower than startup? Start there. Then go into, but what kind of technology? Do I like more of the front-end consumer experience? Do I want more back-end? Do I want something very specific like Web3 or blockchain or something like that? And once you start figuring those things out for yourself, then the best thing you can do for your career is talk to as many PMs as you can from that industry. Because the concept of product manager as the one who drives all the initiatives and talks to customers and sets the vision and the strategy and creates a roadmap and influences engineers and designers and approves and gets the user research and all of those things that you read that are wonderful about product management may not be true for that industry. That's the best thing you can do for your career. I can tell you about mine, but my experience will be very different than somebody who's working at a startup or another type of tech company. My experiences within Microsoft and LinkedIn, who are two companies that are part of the same one, Microsoft, are very different. And then it also changes depending on the team. So it doesn't really matter what I tell you today. I can tell you about my day today and all that stuff. The best thing that you can do for your career is talk to as many PMs as you can. Anyway, that being said, yes, I for example, as a senior PM, that's also another change between PM and senior PM. As a senior PM at LinkedIn, I spend a lot of my time working on vision and strategy documents, figuring out what's the next thing for LinkedIn, what's the next thing to help job seekers, what's the next thing that we're going to do, all that kind of stuff. I spend a lot of my time on meetings working on what is the A/B testing that we're going to do, how are we going to deploy this into the platform, what's the goal, how are we going to measure success. So I spend a lot of time working on those phases. We have user research team, we have a marketing team, and so they help me with all the other stuff. I have a designer team and so on and so forth. But anyway, yeah, I want to spend more time on the go and do your research. That's the best thing. Now, one of the things that I love about being a product manager, when you see how things are making progress and you launch and you see the success, that's the most beautiful sentiment in the world from a job perspective. It's just really exciting to see people using it and even complaining because, right, you want to get feedback. So as a PM, I fall in love with the problem. I want to make sure that my solution is solving the problem. And when it is, it's just amazing. It is absolutely an amazing feeling. But then on the downside, the thing that I don't really, really like, and I don't think any PM does, is that you have to protect a lot of things in your life. In speaking about job, like you need to protect your calendar, you need to protect your roadmap, you need to protect your decisions. And by protect, I mean you can't take one step in front of you without bringing all the data, without bringing all the team, without bringing everyone. And don't get me wrong, that's amazing. It's a very collaborative environment, but you need a lot of preparation to keep thriving and pushing things forward. So it's a never-ending game. It's always doing research, always making sure that you optimize your calendar so that you get to work, but you also get to attend the meetings that are important. You're going to get bombarded with hundreds of meetings. Sometimes I was booked 5 times at the same time in a week. It's impossible to do everything. So I think that's the part that I like the least, which is I should spend more time, working on vision, strategy, all of this. And I spend a lot of time checking, okay, what is this email about? Do I need to attend this meeting? Am I required? Let me message this person because I'm not supposed to be in that meeting. And so I spend a lot of time in that. And it's like, yeah, that's the kind of boring thing, but we all have to do it. Anyway, I don't want to take more time because I know there's a lot of questions. Thank you everyone for the questions. Josh, I'll let you drive from here.
Super cool insights. Thank you for sharing, Diego. With that, we'll open up the floor for audience Q&A. We have Alex, Amit, Tenny, Aki, and Kieran in that order. And after that, we'll go to Ayok, Ridwan, and Kevin. So in the order that I typed in the chat, please feel free to come off mute, switch on your video, and ask the question. If you don't feel comfortable, type it in the chat or DM it to me, and I'll ask it for you. And I know we only have about 10-15 minutes, so we'll try to get to the other questions offline. You can connect with both Diego, me, and the Co.Lab team. We'd love to follow up over LinkedIn and make sure that we answer all the questions. So with that, Alex, you have the floor for your question.
Can you guys hear me? You're good?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Diego. I really enjoy watching your videos and awesome to see you in person here. So Yash kind of referred. So I'm the dentist. I have a couple of interviews lined up kind of in that healthcare space, but I kind of wanted to go back what you said, like your dream was always to work for, Twitch or Xbox. Right now, because I'm making this transition, I'm kind of taking more of a shotgun approach and kind of throwing my resume out there and see what sticks. I know this is kind of more of a personal preference, but what are your thoughts about, for people trying to make this pivot, should we be a little bit more discriminate, kind of really think about what it is that we want to pivot into, especially since this is a second career for a lot of us? Or right. Is the key to just get your foot in the door and kind of figure it out from there?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, to all questions, even if it's specific, I'll try to answer general so that it applies to everyone. But yeah, thank you for the question, Alex. So my recommendation, get into tech, get into product management, because I know that's a big entry barrier. Once you are there, it's way easier to move around. It's way easier because now you don't need to prove that you can do tech and product management. You already have those. So you may start at a startup that maybe it's not your cup of tea. It's not the best thing in the world. But then you need to be strategic about thinking, what do I like? What do I don't like? Where do I want to go next? And like I was saying at the beginning of my story is, how are you going to tell your story? And if you're missing certain skills, if you're missing certain experience, what is your plan to get that experience? Could be side projects, could be volunteering, could be in your own company. But my recommendation is always, if you have an offer or you have more opportunity in a specific space because of your experience, go for it. Once you're in the industry, way easier to move.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Amit, you're next.
Hey, thanks, Yash. And thanks, Diego, for taking the time to share your insights. Really been enjoying your insightful content on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And thanks for sharing the split between the technical versus the non-technical, the back end, the front end PM. I'm just intrigued, based on your experience in big tech, what's the percentage split like for PM roles between technical and non-technical PMs?
I'm going to tell you why that's a hard question, because Microsoft doesn't make a distinction, right? So for Microsoft, all PMs are actually program managers. Let me change that. The title is program manager, but the job is product manager. But there's no technical PM versus PM. Google, there are very few TPMs, technical PM roles, or fewer roles, but the PMs, they also ask for computer science background. So it's a really hard question, simply because of that, because companies do whatever they want with the titles. That being said, I think Google is probably one of the only ones that are really make a big emphasis on you need, or we strongly prefer a computer science background or a software engineering experience. Other than that, companies like Microsoft or Apple or Meta, there's really not that big of a difference. If you go to a startup, that's another game. But in big tech companies, I wouldn't be too much worried about that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thanks, Diego.
Annie, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you, Diego. Just like everyone said before, I think I followed you on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. In fact, I actually found out about this 10 minutes before it started. My question was more about, is more this resume CV situation. I've got an assistant in my title, and I'm an e-commerce assistant, but I haven't had a manager for 4 months. So basically I've been doing her job. And I've tried to negotiate a title change. They're not budging. Basically, I have a digital marketing background. That's kind of what I did before. I stopped to have children and raise the family, etc. So how much does that matter, having an assistant in your title? How much does your title matter before you go to break into product management?
It's a difficult answer. Here's why. It's going to matter for some people. Some people will, very unfortunately, will look at your resume, not just yours, and say, oh, you have XYZ title, or, oh, you come from XYZ school. And they're going to rule you out of the process, regardless of anything else that you have. So sometimes it will matter. It's very unfortunate. And I don't know if there's a perfect solution in place right now. So I don't have an answer for that piece. That being said, in cases like yours, where you've been doing that kind of work, I've seen people putting the title. So you could have the title of whatever your manager is as a title, and put in parentheses something like part-time or 30% of the time. So kind of signaling that you're doing that besides your current job, to help alleviate a little bit of the problem of, yeah, some people will look at the title assistant and they'll say, no, I'm looking for an assistant. So thank you for doing this. It's very unfortunate. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't just happen with assistant. It happens with so many job titles. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing that you can do is, if you start a side project, if you start, even if you start a company, don't get me wrong, you don't need money to start a company. It's a side project with the idea of making business out of it. And I can, for anybody interested, I can send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll send you an article of how a PM made business out of an Excel file, and I'm not kidding, and everything based on LinkedIn posts. So seriously, send me a message, I'll send you that. Anyway, if you start that, then your title could start with that piece, right? You could be the PM for your own project, for your company, and then will come assistant, and that also helps leverage a little bit. I know I went a little bit quick, but I want to make sure we go more questions, sorry. But does that kind of help you answer your question?
Yes, it does. I've actually started a business.
That goes at the top. So, that goes at the top.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks, Sunny and Diego. Aki, you're next.
Hi, Diego. Thanks for doing this chat. Actually, a year ago, I watched your videos and ended up becoming a PM. Also thanks to Co.Lab, of course. So my question is, I'm now like transitioning into another company and doing some interviews. And the aspect of being data-driven comes up a lot. So I wanted to ask you, what does it really mean to be a data-driven PM? And does that just mean like you have experience or skills in like data analytics tools, or like, what does it really mean?
Yeah, I'm going to make an example. Thanks to how you started. All right, listen, folks, if you want to pass an interview and you want the best tips, go to my channel. And if you don't believe me, just listen to Aki. She's my data point, right? That influences a decision. People are going to be like, oh, wait a second. This is not just Diego, bullshitting us and saying why we should go and check his channel. It actually works. And here's a living proof. That is being data driven. I'm going to go to my engineering team and I won't say, hey guys, let's build this. It's much more complicated than that. It's like, hey, I did this research. I look at this data. I understand the segment. I understand the pain point. We ran a survey. We ran a focus group. We did interviews. We got all of this information. We found a problem. We're going to get more data for it as much as we can. We're going to put a strategy, a vision based on all the research. Here's the solution to the problem with all of this thing behind supporting it. It doesn't matter if it's in Power BI or an Excel file or, you know, whatever. What matters is being data driven is that your decisions will be based on data. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome.
Cool beans. Kieran's question is next. I will share it on behalf of them because they're in a noisy place. They'd like to know what different entry-level roles are available in product management, or are they mostly managerial roles?
Different companies will treat the entry level different. So for example, some companies will call it associate product manager. Companies like Microsoft will call them PM1. Companies like Facebook will call them RPM, the rotational product manager program. So each company will call it different. We go again to the problem of the titles. The best way to know if you can get into an entry-level job is by looking at the job description. Other places like LinkedIn, we also have an associate PM role, but it's definitely a small cohort. So depending on the company, you have to see, let's look at the job description. Let's see if it's an entry-level role, and let's see how many, you know, different types of positions are open. Don't trust, the long story short of this is don't trust the title, go into the job description, because that's what's going to tell you really if it's an entry job or not.
Great, thank you. We'll try to squeeze in a couple of quick questions before we wrap up.
Go for it.
Say thank you, everyone. Next is IOC. Their question is, Diego, you recommended that having a Scrum certification isn't necessary, but can be helpful, and you would encourage it. Would you ever need it?
Need it? No. Encourage it? If you have free time and the money. It's way better. If you ask me to prioritize things, I would prioritize side projects or building your own company. Again, it could be a side project with just expectations of, you know, selling stuff. So building a side project, I would prioritize it 10 times above a Scrum certification. I don't have it. In fact, no one in my close circle of friends or PMs that I've known through LinkedIn, we don't have any certification like that.
Awesome. Okay, one last question. I'm trying to scroll to make sure I get the right person. Ridwan, it is you. You have the opportunity to ask the last question. Go for it.
Thank you, Yash. I'm sorry, and Diego. This is like a kind of conversation. So we're grabbing with a lot of new information. So thank you guys for hosting it like this way. So my question for Diego is, in terms of budgeting and finance, aside from building the roadmap, what tips and how do you go on about that? Like building a budget for your product, or you were building something and then you need to make projections of how much maybe projections of like revenue, how much revenue you could expect or users you could expect, and then how you factor that into your plan and to your roadmap, the financial part. And the second thing is, I'm going to be applying some piece of knowledge that I've learned from you today, which is ask for like established product managers to share their work. So this is like a formal request of how can I, in your own work, maybe share your work. I'm in Addis Ababa and between Hargeisa. And in East Africa, there aren't much of like product management jobs. So I would try to, get going, get some experience on that side. So can I do that with you? I think I have all the necessary skills and the things you have been talking about. So I'm just trying to, shadow your work on you on maybe. I think you get.
Yeah. No. Thank you for asking. Let me answer the questions. By the way, super quick because I know we're almost out of time. There's a lot of questions. I love them. Thank you so much for all the love. Send me a connection request. Everyone who wants to connect on LinkedIn, please add a message. Tell me you're from this event because I receive a lot of requests without any message. So that way I know that you're from this event. And then feel free to ask me any question in the chat. I'll try to answer as many as possible. But to your question, so the first one, in most cases, in my experience has been working in big tech companies. We have a finance department, and I've never been. When you work at companies like Microsoft, it's not that I'm the PM for Excel. right? It could be the PM for one part of Excel, which could be the top bar, which is going to influence the product in some way or another. So it's not like I own the revenue, the revenue piece. So this is the same thing I was saying at the beginning, which is in books and all these places, you do see the ideal role of product, but when you go into the industry, it's really depends on a lot of things. So I don't personally have had to go through that. I have a finance department at LinkedIn, at Microsoft, at Cisco, the places where I've worked, and they help us with all that stuff. So I don't do that. But if I had to do it, typically it happens much more in a startup. Then there's a lot of frameworks. I think RISE is one of the most popular ones, and it factors in the impact. And if your impact is about revenue, you can also estimate it that way, factor it into that formula. But again, RISE is just an example. I'm going a little bit on a rush because I know we're out of time, but hopefully that answers a little bit of the question. And then the second piece is, I would love to say yes. I would love to say yes to everyone. The reality is that there's nothing that I'm doing today that I could say this is great for a PM experience. Right now, I'm working with editors, designers, social media, people, because that's where I need help. And that is absolutely meaningless to a product manager. So thank you so much for the offering. I would love to have projects for people to jump on board, maybe one day, but right now I really don't have anything. But yeah, anyway, sorry about that. It's, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate everyone coming out. The surprise that I was referring to is that we have a special code for a discount for the next 2 Co.Lab cohorts. If you sign up within the next 48 hours, you can redeem it. The code is PM Diego. I also typed it in the chat, and we would absolutely love to answer the questions we couldn't get to. Please follow up with Diego. His LinkedIn is in the chat. Follow up with Shafumi, Helen, the co-founders of Co.Lab, me. Follow all of us on LinkedIn and Twitter if you would like to get more of these events and resources shared with you. It was a blast having everyone, and we would like to keep in touch with you and make sure that we are providing resources and adapting to everything that the audience wants from us. Alrighty, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great day, and we'll share out the recording.